Welcome to Wichita Liberty TV with Bob Weeks.
Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Wichita and Kansas government and politics. We're broadcast on KGPT Channel 26.1, also its companion website, kgpt26.com. Some of you may know me for my blog, The Voice for Liberty, at wichitaliberty.org. There you'll find the motto is individual liberty, limited government, and free markets in Wichita and Kansas. So I try to cover things that may not be covered by the Wichita Eagle or other television stations or radio, or if we do cover the same news, I'll do it from the perspective of economic freedom, limited government, and individual liberty, as these are the things that are important, and these are the things that are so often under attack by our governments, be it at the federal, state, or local level. So please visit wichitaliberty.org. You can subscribe to the email newsletter I send 2 or 3 times a week, and if you'd like to contact me, you can find my email address there, or just email at bob.weeks@gmail.com. Well, would you pay $48.62 to visit the Wichita Art Museum? Well, if you've been to the Wichita Art Museum, you probably didn't pay that much unless you made a voluntary contribution, as the normal adult admission to the Art Museum is $7, but that isn't anywhere near the cost of each visit. Because according to the most recent edition of Wichita's Performance Measure Report, the cost per visitor for the Wichita Art Museum in 2012 was $48.62. That's a little higher than in the 3 previous years, but much lower than 2009, when the city reported a cost of $59 per visitor. And as can be seen in this table, other city cultural attractions registered costs per visitor that are much higher than their admission fees. The Mid-America All-Indian Center has a per-visitor cost of $11.37. The Wichita Historical Museum is $36.59 per visitor. Cowtown, $15.94. So, while each person who visits the Art Museum or these other attractions may or may not be willing to pay as much as $48.62 for admission, well, someone is paying that. Now, this performance measure report is a valuable document, I believe. For 2012, it's about 168 pages of data that lets citizens get an idea of the cost of providing government services, such as an art museum. There's also a shorter version titled the Citizens Performance Measure Report. You can find both of these easily by using the Google or your favorite search website and search for Wichita Performance Measure Report. You'll find it right away. But returning to the topic of spending on arts, like the Wichita Art Museum, supporters of government funding for arts have economic studies that purport to show what a great deal it is for cities and states to spend tax money on arts. We saw it here on Wichita Liberty TV a few episodes ago. There was the illustration of a theater company using taxpayer funds to buy a gallon of paint, and how that set off a chain of beneficial economic activity. Well, that's all true. But you've read, I've read, we've worked through the book Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. He, like Frederick Bastiat before him, implores us to ask this question: well, where did that $20 that the theater company used to buy the gallon of paint come from? Isn't it possible that a homeowner might have bought the same gallon of paint, but is now not able to because he must pay taxes to support the theater company? But it's easy to see the theater production with its taxpayer-funded painted set. It's not easy to see the house that sits unpainted for a year to pay for the theater's company's paint. That's the difference between the seen and the unseen. And you remember the quote from Frederick Bastiat: between a good and a bad economist, this constitutes the entire difference. One takes account of the visible effect, the other takes account both of the effects which are seen and also of those which it is necessary to foresee. Now, this difference is enormous, he said, for it almost always happens that when the immediate consequence is favorable, the ultimate consequences are fatal, and the converse. And from our study of economics in one lesson, we know that even very smart and important people are seduced by what is easy to see. We know to look harder, beyond the immediate time frame and beyond the group, that's usually a special interest group, that benefits from the government spending. But there's something else regarding government spending on arts like the Wichita Art Museum. Is anyone else offended, as I am, that government taxes us to provide for us the art that politicians, bureaucrats, and their sycophants think we should consume? What type of personality feels entitled to forcibly make these personal decisions for others? And we've seen this issue play out at the state level when 3 years ago, Governor Brownback abolished funding for the Kansas Arts Commission. Since then, some funding has been restored. But it's important that arts organizations survive on their own merits. They need to produce a product or service that satisfies their customers and patrons, just as any other business or human endeavor must. This is especially true with something so personal as art. David Bose of the Cato Institute, who was here in the Wichita Liberty TV studios a few months ago, he wrote this about government art funding. He said, "It is precisely because art has power, because it deals with basic human truths, that it must be kept separate from government. Government, as I noted earlier, involves the organization of coercion. And in a free society, coercion should be reserved only for such essential functions of government, such as protecting rights and punishing criminals. People should not be forced to contribute money to artistic endeavors that they may not improve, nor should artists be forced to trim their sails to meet government standards." Government funding of anything involves government control. That insight, of course, is part of our folk wisdom. He who pays the piper calls the tune. Who takes the king's shilling sings the king's song. Well, that's David Bose of the Cato Institute. Well, government art. Isn't this a sterling example of an oxymoron, things that don't go together? Must government weasel its way into every aspect of our lives? And the fact that government arts funding means tax dollars taken through coercion. Well, don't government arts promoters realize this? How better to crush the human spirit, the same spirit that the arts are meant to uplift and enrich. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Well, Kansas has a weak open records law, and as it turns out, the city of Wichita doesn't want to follow this law, as weak as it is. But with a simple change of attitude towards open government and the citizens' right to know, Wichita could live up to the goals its leaders have set. Well, open records laws allow citizens to ask government agencies to produce records. The agency must then reply. At the federal level, the law is known as the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA. States may name their laws something else, like in Kansas, it's the Kansas Open Records Act. And while these laws are valuable, we find that in practice, governmental agencies find many ways to avoid filling records requests. Two ways are relying on the exemptions that are built into the laws and expanding them, I think, and another is charging excessive fees that citizens don't want to pay. Well, locally, the city of Wichita is proud to be an open and transparent government agency, its officials say. Wichita Mayor Coral Brewer often speaks in favor of government transparency. For example, in his State of the City address a few years ago, he listed as an important goal for the city this. He said, "And we must provide transparency in all that we do." And when the city received an award for transparency in 2013, a city news release quoted Wichita City Manager Robert Layton as this. He said, "The City Council has stressed the importance of transparency for this organization. We're honored to have received a Sunny Award, and we will continue to empower and engage citizens by providing information necessary to keep them informed on the actions the government is taking on their behalf." Well, contrary to what the mayor and manager say, when we look at some specific areas of government transparency, we find that the city's efforts are deficient. So following are a few ways in which the city could improve, and I have a lot more about this available at my website, wichitaliberty.org. Well, the Kansas Open Records Act states in its prelude, it says, "It is declared to be the public policy of the state that public records shall be open for inspection by any person unless otherwise provided by this act, and this act shall be liberally construed and applied to promote such policy." But in reality, Kansas has a weak open records law, and Wichita doesn't want to follow that law, as weak as it is. But with a simple change of attitude towards open government, Wichita could live up to the goals its leaders have set. Citizen watchdogs need access to records and data. The City of Wichita, however, has created several not-for-profit organizations that are controlled by the city and largely funded by tax money. The three I'm concerned with are the Wichita Downtown Development Corporation, the Go Wichita Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the Greater Wichita Economic Development Coalition. Now, I've asked each of these three organizations for checkbook-level spending data. Each has refused to comply, using the reasoning that they are not public agencies as defined in the Kansas Open Records Act. But consider the Downtown Development Corporation. In every year but one, its percent of revenue derived from taxation is well over 90%, and in some years the only income WDDC received was from taxes and a small amount of interest earned. But the Wichita City Attorney backs these organizations in their interpretation of the law that they are not public agencies and therefore don't have to fulfill requests under the Kansas Open Records Act. And most city council members agree with this interpretation also. And after 14 months investigating this matter at my request, the Sedgwick County District Attorney, Nola Folston, she's no longer in office, well, she agreed with the city's position. And now the only course of action open to me as a citizen watchdog is to raise thousands of dollars to privately fund a lawsuit. Well, there is one other course of action, however. That is, these agencies and the city could fulfill the records request that I have made. Now, these agencies believe the law does not require them to release the records, but the law does not prohibit or restrict them from releasing these records. They could fulfill these records requests if they wanted to, which goes back to what I say is the poor attitude of the city towards open government and transparency. Citizen watchdogs and others need the ability to examine the spending of tax money. When government creates quasi-governmental bodies that are almost totally funded through taxes and then refuses to disclose how that money is spent, well, we have to wonder why the city doesn't want citizens to know how this money is being spent. And here's an example of why this is important. Mike Howarder is a trustee of Labette Community College in Parsons. He noticed that a check number was missing from a check register, and upon his inquiry, it was revealed that the missing check was used to reimburse the college president for a political campaign contribution. Now, it was determined that the college president committed no violation of any law by making this political contribution using college funds. This is an example of the type of information that citizens may want to know regarding the way public funds are spent. Well, another area where Wichita could improve government is its website. And this is the most important way governments can communicate with their subject through their websites. Well, some might disagree on it being the most important way, but it is important, I feel. And Wichita moved to a new website early in 2013, almost a year ago. And while the former website had its share of problems, such as a search feature that didn't work very well, the new website has been a step backwards. For example, it appears that for citizen review boards like the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and Historic Preservation Board, agendas and minutes prior to 2012 did not survive the conversion to the new website. Other documents that were previously available but appear to be missing after the conversion include the daily arrest reports. And it appears that only a few years of past budgets are now available, although the comprehensive annual financial reports are available. Well, if I missed any documents that are actually available, I apologize, but the fact that I couldn't find them is its own problem. Well, also, the prior website had a useful service called My Wichita. It was very useful. You would register, and then you would be presented with a list of various types of documents, agendas, minutes, and things like that. And when new documents became available, you'd get an email. That email's reminder service was very valuable, but it didn't survive the conversion to the new website, and there's nothing new to replace its function. And the search feature on the new website is better than on the old website, but there is a curious twist to the new search. It gives different results depending on the starting page of the search. This could be a potentially useful feature if users were made aware of it. For example, if the user is currently viewing the Finance Department webpage and starts a search, the system could give the user a choice of searching just the Finance Department or all of the city's website. Presently, it appears that the search would be confined to just the Finance Department, and users could easily conclude that documents they searched for don't exist when in fact they do. Another thing, most new websites in recent years will adapt so that they are usable using mobile devices like smartphones, and not so with the new Wichita website. And another thing Wichita could do is provide better access to spending data. Most governmental agencies post their checkbooks on their websites. Sedgwick County does this, and also does the Wichita School District, but not the city of Wichita. Even after asking for checkbook spending data, Wichita can supply data of only limited utility. What was supplied to me was data in PDF form and as images, not text. It would be difficult and beyond the capability of most citizens to translate this data into useful format. And even if someone translated the reports to a computer-readable format, I still don't think this data would be very useful. This is a serious defect in the city's transparency efforts. And here's something else that needs changing too. Kansas law requires that local government agencies publish legal notices for a variety of topics. Presently, these are published in the Wichita Eagle at great cost to taxpayers. You may remember earlier this year or last year when I showed the large insert of the list of delinquent property taxes in Sedgwick County, and that was printed 3 times. Now, the legislature could eliminate the requirement to print these notices in a newspaper. And we'd be better off if these notices published on the government agency's website where they could be searched and archived. This would increase the usability of these documents. And another thing we could do is to magnify the value of the work that agencies do in fulfilling records requests. When governmental agencies like the City of Wichita fulfill records requests, they could also publish the records on their websites. And most of the time, the records are supplied electronically, so this is an additional simple and very low-cost step that would leverage the value of the city's effort. There are a handful of agencies across the country that do this. But imagine how Wichita could improve its reputation for open and transparent government if it started to make this information freely available through this proactive step. Then there are our taxpayer-funded lobbyists. What do these lobbyists do in Topeka? Well, one thing that lobbyists do is testify before committees in both verbal and written form. Another thing they do is to prepare reports for their clients, advising them on upcoming legislation, analyzing how the legislation affects them, and what the prospects for the bill might be. They also meet with legislators and their clients, which of course are your elected officials. Well, here's a proposal that will help citizens make better use of their taxpayer-funded lobbyists. I see nothing in the Kansas Open Records Act that allows local governmental units in Kansas to refuse to disclose these documents, testimony, reports by lobbyists to their government clients, and the lobbyist calendars or billing records for contract lobbyists. Instead of making citizens ask for these records and possibly paying fees to obtain what they're already paying for, why don't local governments post these documents immediately on their websites? Citizens could then benefit from the activities of the lobbyists they're paying for. They could also learn more about legislation as it works its way through the legislative process. And citizens could also judge whether the positions taken by government lobbyists that they're paying for are aligned with their own policy preferences. If these actions taken by taxpayer-funded lobbyists are truly in the public interest, you'd think that cities, schools, and school boards would already be making this information easily available. In any case, there should be no resistance to starting this program. Well, this transparency agenda I've outlined could be accomplished at very little cost. It would improve the relations between City Hall and citizens. It would let Wichita live up to the goals that the mayor and city manager proclaim, but I don't think they really believe.
You're watching Wichita Liberty TV.
Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks. Well, just another note on government transparency. The Kansas Legislature has now started its 2014 session. And there are some who would like the Kansas House of Representatives and the Kansas Senate to broadcast video of their proceedings like C-SPAN does for the United States House and Senate. Video would be great, but I think it would be probably costly to implement. But here's something that we could do that would be very simple. The legislature already broadcasts audio of their proceedings, but you must listen live, as the broadcasts are not made available to the public in any other way. It would be exceedingly simple to make these past broadcasts available to the public. It could be done at no cost on YouTube and at little cost on other sites specifically tailored to host audio. As a side benefit, at YouTube, the recordings would be transcribed by machine, giving a rough transcript of the proceedings. Well, and I do caution you, I use the word adjective rough, as if you've ever looked at these machine-generated transcripts on YouTube. They vary widely in accuracy, but they still have some value. Well, broadcasting video of House and Senate proceedings would be a large step that would probably have a large cost. But archiving the audio and making it available provides nearly all the benefit of video and at very little additional cost. This is something that the legislature could do starting today with a simple desire to do so. Well, finally for today, let me leave you with this. Have you heard that Kansas schools have cut to the bone, or they're operating at maximum efficiency, or there's nowhere else to cut, or that there's no need to audit school district efficiency? You probably have. And when you hear those claims again, think of this. When Kansas governmental agencies receive requests for records under the Kansas Open Records Act that we talked about earlier, they must respond to the requester within 3 business days. Now, most often this response does not contain the requested records. Instead, the response is usually either a statement of how much the records will cost or a denial of the request. But every agency I've dealt with, federal, state, city, county, they've been content to send this response by email. That is, except for USD 259, the Wichita Public School District. The Wichita Public School District sends the response in the form of a printed letter mailed using United States Postal Service priority mail at a cost of $5.05 for postage. And that's in addition to the cost of preparing a printed letter. And this is not an isolated incident. It's happened to me several times. Every governmental agency I have encountered, except for the Wichita Public School District, is content to use email to respond to records requests, of course at very low cost. Now, with a budget of over $600 million, $5 isn't very much, except this pattern of wasting money on postage must be repeated many times each year. So when you hear that Kansas schools are grossly underfunded, or that teachers have to spend their personal funds to buy classroom supplies, ask yourself this. Why does the Wichita Public School District spend $5.05 in postage to send something that everyone else sends by email? Well, thanks for watching this episode of Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks.